She's sweet, she's salty, she's smart and craves chocolate every day. Here is your host, the Greek goddess of comedy, Ellen Karis.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sweet and Salty with Ellen Karis. I am your host, Ellen Karis, and you are listening to the guest edition. That is right. It's not just me tonight. Thank God. We have such a great guest. Listen, at least when I get guests, I get guests. I am so excited about having this gentleman on. He actually reached out to me because of a podcast that I had done with a previous guest that he knows. And I was so mesmerized by the story, and I spent quite a few hours doing a deep dive. Oh, Ellen, who is it? Don't keep us in suspense. I'm going to tell you. Now, you know, I've been a comedian for a long time, and I always feel that comics should do their comedy history. Like you should go to comedy history class to learn who came before you. And when I mean before you, I mean like when the invention of television came on, you know, like that going, yeah, you really need to go far back and to see who these greats are. Well, one of the greats, and I did get to see him in Las Vegas. It's got to be like 20 years ago already. And I also had seen him once at the Friars Club, is a comedian by the name of Pat Cooper. Pat, I guess you put him in the category of the Borscht Belt comics. He played all over the country, and in the 60s and the 70s, and the 80s, and even the 90s, he was a mainstay on a lot of talk shows, and he was also a frequent guest on Howard Stern. And we're going to get into all of that. So, what does that have to do with my guest? Well, I happen to have Pat Cooper's only son, here with us today, Michael Caputo. Welcome, Michael. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen, for having me. This is so humbling.
I have so many questions in my head. And so what makes this special, right? So is it comic son, but this family, the Cooper, well, it's really the birth name is Caputo. Pat changed it because back in the day you couldn't have an Italian, a Greek name, and it had to be very vanilla back in show business days. And I kind of feel like that only changed in the last 5, maybe 10 years. It's not that long ago, but anyway, the Caputo family, the Caputo/Cooper family, had unfortunately didn't have the traditional upbringing, and there was a lot of discourse in the family, and it went very public, especially on the Howard Stern show. And you can give us the timeline and everything. And then a little later on Geraldo Rivera had his own talk show, and Michael was on that, and his dad called in, and it's been a very public feud. But anybody that knows me knows I'm Greek. Family is everything to me, and this story does have a good ending to it. But we all fight with our family. I mean, we all do, but to do it in public, it brings it to a completely, it's its own animal. So, Michael, you are Pat Cooper's son. You also have a sister. Your parents got married, but they split up pretty soon after your sister was being born, right?
My sister was 2 weeks old, and I was 2.5. And she's my biological sister. Her name is Louise. We call her Luann. She has 3 kids now, and my father had me and my sister. My father was thrown out of the house. We were living in my grandmother's house, my father. And anytime I mention my grandmother, I'm always talking about my father's mother.
Right, which let me just stop 1 second. First of all, by the way, these are Brooklyn people, Brooklyn born people. And it's got a little bit of an interesting twist, because Pat Cooper also not only had a lot of disagreements with his son and his daughter, obviously your mother, ex-wife, because they have ultimately divorced, but even his own mother, who you were very close with and you grew up with, and he had three sisters, your father, right? He had three
That is correct.
sisters,
He
right?
had one sister, Gracie, who was an opera singer, trained,
Uh-huh.
a real trained opera singer, and she was closer in age to my father, so they were closer. And
Mm-hmm.
then my grandmother and grandfather broke up because she caught my grandfather cheating. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And he went back to Italy for a while. When he returned, in the course of 10 years, they had two more kids together. And my
Oh,
father had younger sisters,
uh-huh.
Carol and Maria.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So now the dynamics between my father and Gracie were always a little bit closer because they were closer in age.
Right.
And I can get into the story how my father got into show business by this talent show that was out there, and give you some of the background of the family. But I'm his only biological son. My sister is his only biological daughter. And they had adopted, when my father had remarried again, they had adopted a baby girl in 1970.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay.
So just to kind of go back to the family dynamics, because it's sort of you find some of those missing pieces. So your dad, this is no disrespect to your grandma, but your dad came from a lot of turmoil, right? I mean, your parents, his parents were together, they were split up, he came back, it was cheating, whatever. So unfortunately, this is what he saw, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, if you don't break the cycle, history repeats itself. But also, let's put it all into context. We're talking about when was your dad born?
29.
1929. Okay, so very,
Depression.
very,
Depression. And my
very
grandmother had 5 kids, and she lost a boy before my father.
Mhm.
Died of pneumonia at 2 years old. So my
Mhm.
father had a brother, but he died at 2 years old. So my
So
grandmother was raising kids up
right.
through hell with my grandfather, who was a bricklayer in the Union. He didn't want to buy a house. He was born in Italy. So to me, he was like, I don't know how derogatory this is to say now, but he was an old guinea, an old greaseball from Italy. My
Mhm.
grandmother was born in America, and
Mhm.
she worked as a seamstress for $80 a week. And she always wanted to get her own house. And she always used to say to me, I don't know what's wrong with you, what was wrong with your grandfather. I wanted to get a house. He didn't want to. He had hands of gold.
Mm.
So my grandmother ended up buying a brownstone in Park Slope. $1,000 down. The brownstone was 10 grand.
Oh my
When
God.
she died, we ended up selling it for almost $1 million.
Uh-huh. Oh, well, that's
Now it's worth about 2.5, 3 million.
right. Well, why don't you just mention how did your father get into comedy? Because sometimes, the comedy comes from pain. So how did it
Well,
transpire for
my
him?
father, he didn't like just get into comedy. Uh, of course, they worshipped Gracie. She was the first child, and she was an opera singer. And to be an opera singer in an Italian family, well, she was like, the firstborn. She was a girl. She sang beautifully. She goes to a talent show. My father goes, he's older. I don't know if the girls were probably very young. They probably didn't go to the talent show. And Gracie's supposed to sing. And my grandmother and grandfather, they're really proud. Maybe she's going to win, because she does have a beautiful voice. My Aunt Gracie always did. And my father, growing up, his father was so old fashioned. He used to be making faces at the table or doing impersonations. And he did what every other kid does. I did that at the table. I used to make crazy faces, stick my tongue out when people were taking pictures of me. He was a very normal kind of a kid in that sense. But my grandfather didn't like that. So you would sit down and you would keep it quiet. You eat, you shut your mouth, you finish food, you get off the table when I tell you to get off of the table, and blah, 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 blah. And my father and him had friction. And I also found out later in life, after my father, I spoke with him, my grandfather used to beat my father physically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was verbally abused by my father, but physically abused also, sometimes verbally is worse. But to get verbally abused and physically abused and living in a household amongst all girls, okay, sisters were younger, the younger ones were younger, but he was close with Gracie. So they go to this talent show. Gracie comes on, she does a singing, and then the guy who was head of the show at one of these movie theaters says, "Oh my God, somebody didn't show up." and we don't have anybody else to go on. So somebody said, Gracie's brother does impersonations on the corner with his friends. And maybe we could throw him up there. So the guy says, listen, I'll give him like 5 minutes. If he's not good, we're going to pull him off. Well, guess what? My father goes up there, does his impersonations, tears the house down, and he wins first prize. Well, my grandfather was like, oh my God. He was so angry. How could my daughter not win? We trained her, we sent her for lessons for singing. Pat is a buffoon. He's nothing but a fool, a buffoon. And as my father would later say in life is, if you were Jewish and you did that, you were the next Milton Berle. But you do that at an Italian family, you were nothing more than a buffoon. That's where we started, hanging out on the corners, doing impersonations. Then when he started doing his shtick in 1953, 54, 55, my mother used to go with him when they were dating. He would go do his, how comedy starts. You get 5-minute sets, you do a 5-minute, and that's how he started. And then he started going up to where you said the Borscht Belt.
Catskills, right.
Then he took off in 1963. So he was in it 10 years before he made it. And his break was Jackie Gleason, 1963.
Oh, okay. So wait, Jackie Gleason had a variety show? Is that what it was at that time?
Yes.
Now, was he ever on Ed Sullivan? Because in that time, Ed Sullivan
I can't swear to that. I would like to check that. I'm not really sure, but my father's break was Jackie Gleason.
Jackie Gleason. So that's fascinating. I love that story. So let's fast forward. So you and your sister were born, your parents break up, sadly, and your father is pretty estranged, right? And he's also a comic, and I'm not defending it, but the life of a comic is you're on the road, you travel, you're at one gig, and the minute you finish, you're looking for the next gig. It's not an easy life. It wasn't.
Listen, my father did
then, and it's not still an easy life.
Well, he did a lot of things in between because he wasn't able to make a living. So he, drove a cab. My father loved driving a cab because he loved speaking to people. He liked communicating. My father always needed an audience. He would tell jokes in the cab. He had stories from people who told him stories in the cab. Then I don't know if he worked on a Frankfurter stand one time. I heard many different things, but he hated bricklaying. And my grandfather wanted him to be a bricklayer. And he said he was the worst bricklayer. He did a bathroom once and he closed the window up with the bricks. That's one of his jokes. I don't know if it's true, but he hated it. My mother used to say to me, he would actually give up his jobs and give it to other guys to work so that he can do something else and go at night. So I used to go with him all the time, and he used to do his sets. And they wrote the Italian, the football wedding. They wrote the Italian wedding. That's what made him on his first album, Our Hero, together on the living room floor. Then he brought somebody to tweak it, and that's how he made it the football wedding. Okay, but it was a very bad breakup. And we were living in my grandmother's house, my father's mother's house, after he left. And he wasn't sending alimony on a regular basis. Okay. And he called my grandmother up frequently, fought with my grandmother like crazy. All right. She was in her 50s at the time. And, made her life miserable. Said, well, if they can't pay the rent, kick them out. And she said to them, I can't kick my grandchildren out. Okay. So now my mother has to take him to court, and she has to tell the court she's not getting checks from my father. Okay. My father was not rich and famous then at all. He was not a known name. When she kicked him out and threw his clothes out the window, he was not known. All right. And not wealthy at all. So, but she made sure that he sent the checks through the court system so they could monitor them. And then the courts would forward the checks to my mother's house. So we got the $40 check every single week, $40 for me, my mother, and my sister. And then it became $90 after a few years. And my grandmother allowed us to live in her house for 5-6 years rent-free. That was what my father's mother did. Now, whether he held that against her, that he felt my grandmother was siding with my mother, but what was she going to do? Throw my mother out in the streets with 2 infants? Right. My mother comes from a poor family. She only graduated. She didn't graduate high school, went the second year of high school. What she did to make Christmases for us was she would walk people's dogs when you didn't have to pick up the dog's poop in those days. And she cleaned people's homes. just to give us Christmases so we wouldn't be affected. But we were affected. But I used to always go down in grandma's house when she used to work. I could smell she was cooking. I could smell it coming up through the vents. I would run downstairs to grandma. Hi, grandma, give her kisses and sit at the table. And it was me and grandma for so many years just talking. And my grandmother never said a bad word about my father. She knew he was wrong. She knew he cheated on my mother from some cutie from Ohio. Okay. And that woman's mother in 1959, her name was Josephine Del Prince. The woman that my father cheated on with her name was Patty Prince. She cut the Del off of it. She was a singer. So she worked with my father. She befriended my mother. My mother thought she was really a friend. My mother had no idea she was sleeping with my father while my mother was carrying my sister in her belly. Okay, so now her mother calls my mother up and says, oh, Dolores, you got to stop this marriage. You know, we're a Christian family from Ohio. We're Christians. My daughter cannot be dating a married man. This is terrible. And my mother said to her, listen, Mrs. Del Prince, they're made for each other. Don't you ever call this house again. And she hung up on Mrs. Del Prince.
Wow.
Okay. That's how that happened.
Wow.
Then my father goes to Mexico and they get a Mexican divorce. Now my father was living on the Upper West Side at that time. I was not used to money or anything like that. I go to his house. We could go in a car or a cab. The doorman comes out, opens the door for us. I'm like 7 or 8 years old. I'm like, holy, what?
Your dad was living on the Upper West Side.
Upper West Side. I end up sleeping over a couple times. I end up meeting her, Patty. They had a beautiful apartment there on West End Avenue, 180 West End Avenue. And I remember her taking me around on her chores. My father, I don't know where he was at the time. Her making me breakfast and her taking me in her hallway, showing me the pictures of her and my father's wedding pictures. And then, of course, when I got home as a little boy, I said, Ma, she's showing me her wedding pictures. My mother said, it's not legal, Mike. They're living common law. A Mexican divorce is not legal. She's still living common law with your father. And she was telling me, a 7-year-old boy. Now, what do I care about what she did? She slept with a married man. She wasn't a Christian. Okay, I went to Catholic school for 12 years. That's not my definition of a Christian. She was an adulteress. Okay. Her adopted daughter compared her on MySpace to Gandhi and Jesus. And I'm looking at MySpace page before Facebook got paid. And I'm saying, is this girl kidding me? More like Mary Magdalene, but not like, Gandhi and Jesus.
So wait, hang on a second. So did your parents get a divorce? They got an official divorce?
They eventually got a divorce, but my mother wouldn't give him one until he agreed to pay alimony, to pay for our health, okay, and to pay for our schooling, okay? College wasn't included. All right? Now, I couldn't understand why my father, being in the business in SAG or after, why he couldn't put me and my sister on the medical insurance. No, we wanted to pay everything cash. So when we went to the dentist to get our teeth cleaned, when my father finally was famous, rich and famous, and living at I'll give you the name of it. He was living at in Las Vegas. You might have heard of this place. It's called the Sierra Vista Ranchos Community. It was a show where a lot of celebrities lived. Jerry, Toady Fields, Sergio Frankie. And they had a show on TV at the time called The Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, hosted by Robin Leach.
Yeah.
And it showed my father's house. I never was ever invited out to his Vegas house. I never got an invitation, but I got to see his house on television. And it looked very luxurious to me, being a Brooklyn boy, growing up in a brownstone, like, oh my God, this is like a mansion. Like, he's so wealthy. So my mother takes him and she wouldn't give him a divorce until he agreed to send money and take care of the kids, because he didn't want to. He didn't want to send any money at all. You know what I mean?
So let me ask you. So what was it? Yeah.
Okay.
So what was it like when you saw your father on television for the first time? Do you remember that?
I felt very proud because I was the only boy in the neighborhood, first of all, who didn't have a mom and dad at home. I mean, I had a mom home, but I had no father.
Right.
It wasn't like today, every other household, you have stepfathers, stepmothers, married 3 and 4 times. So I felt bad when I used to look out the window and seeing the boys go fishing with their dads. Okay. I felt very jealous at that time as a kid, but I was the one with the father on television. So I felt really special.
A huge
But
deal.
the kids would be cruel. But the kids would be cruel to me. Well, if your father's so rich and famous and he's on television, how come you don't have a bicycle? And when I got older, well, how come you don't have a car? If your father's so rich and famous, the kids could be cruel. That's what I had to deal with also. But I felt
what was your reaction when you first saw him? Do you remember? Like, what show was it? Do you remember?
My grandmother started playing his albums first. So I heard his albums before I saw him on TV. That was the thing. I heard his albums. She would tell me stories of what it was like when he was a kid. She always had good things to say, warm things to say, and she got me on the ride. No internet back then, only newspapers. So when he was coming to the Copacabana, she'd say, "You want to go see your father with grandma?" And I'd say, "Yeah, grandma." And my mother never said no to my grandmother. She never said, "Mom, no, I don't want you to take my son." She said, "If he wants to go, you want to take him, Ma, take him." And my grandmother tried to develop a relationship by bringing me to my father. "Here's your son. Don't forget, you have a son. You have a daughter." My sister was younger, and she was kind of afraid of him because when we were in the park with the first visitation rights, all the lawyers always had to be there, and all my mother and father did was scream their heads off. And my sister was a real young girl. She was afraid. I bonded with my grandmother.
Go ahead.
I bonded with my grandmother, all the stories, and that's how I became, eventually, as the years went on, I became like, she had another chance to have a son because my father was estranged from her for her whole life. So I kind of replaced her having another son, and she kind of filled in the gap of me not having a father.
Right.
And this book I wrote, like the book I wrote, Dear Pat Cooper, okay, that's us at the Cooper, me, my father, and my grandmother at the Cooper, is really a book celebrating my grandmother and my mother, the two women who were there for me. And it's a letter to my father. That's why it's called Dear Pat Cooper. If I was writing a letter to you, Ellen, it'd be Dear Ellen, right? And to let him know the things he missed out of my life by not being in my life. And that's what the whole book's about. Also, I feel it's not a Daddy Dearest book. I didn't want anybody to think it was a Daddy Dearest book. It's a love story of a relationship between a grandson and a grandmother and an estranged father, and of me chasing my father now at this time for 60 years to try to get this much reciprocal love from a man who was unwilling to give it to me. He didn't give anything, and he ended up adopting a new family. His wife drew the wedge even stronger. It takes two to tango, so I can't put all the blame on Patty Prince, but she didn't help. I had to call the house up. She screened all the calls. I found it really strange when I called. A lot of times she said my father wasn't there. He could have been outside by the poolside. She made trouble one time. She said I disrespected her on the phone. So I said to my father, how did I disrespect her? I always say, "Hello, Patty, how are you?" "Well, you didn't make small talk with her. You didn't ask her how she was feeling." And I said, "Dad, I want to speak to you. I don't want to speak to her. Okay, I have a mother already. All right? I want to speak to you, Dad. That's why I'm calling." I had to reverse the charges. Okay. She accepted most of the times. I sent Father's Day cards out, Christmas Day cards, never heard a word from my father. My mother says to me, "Be smart, send them a signed receipt so they can't say they never got them." That's what I did. And I would always see her signature, Patty Cooper. So she intercepted everything that I sent to my father trying to reach out.
So
really very evil of a woman.
She passed away, right? She
2005 of cancer.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get to the Howard Stern call. So you've sort of given us the backstory of your father being estranged.
How it happened.
So it was 1989. Was that when
August 1989? Robin,
Quiver's birthday. Now, just for those that either don't remember or were too young, Howard Stern was on FM radio. He was on AM radio.
92K, wasn't he on 92K Rock?
He was on 92K Rock, but before Sirius. Sirius was, I think, about 15 years ago now. It's been 16 years ago,
right?
A little bit more. He's a he was a really, really huge deal back then. I mean, he's still sort of a big deal now, but he was a huge deal back then. You have to understand that there weren't as many people in entertainment as there are now. So, each person, if you did get to that level, like Pat Cooper, like Howard Stern, people knew you. You were a household name. And for anybody that is interested, also, if you go on YouTube, it's on there and you can hear it, which is
and it's also on my website, dearpatcooper.com.
On your website, on Michael's website. We're going to make sure we plug everything because you have other books and we want people to be able to find you. So you tell us how that all transpired. Pat Cooper was somewhat of a frequent guest. He comes in and then what happens?
Okay. So I'm sleeping at home. I'm living with my mother because I just get back from California. I was out on my own since I'm 19. I'm 31, I think, at the time, or whatever, 1989, 57, 67, 77, 87. I'm 32 at the time. And I get a call in bed from one of my best friends who's no longer with us. And he says, Mike, quick, call up Howard Stern. Call up Howard Stern. I said, who's Howard Stern? Who? Oh, I listen to him every day. He said, your father's on the radio. He's bad-mouthing the family. I said, Bill, my father's been airing out the dirty laundry for 2 years. Howard is not going to put me on there. I am not a celebrity. I am nobody. Okay? And I don't know. I'm a fan of his. I know he'll put you on. Call. Okay, Bill, makes you happy. I get out of bed. I put my dual cassettes in and I call. And they couldn't believe I called in. He immediately let me on. And I was on probably 45 minutes, maybe longer, taping this whole thing. As soon as I got off the telephone, they're talking about me calling in, surprise, and it was very amicable. Well, we're going to meet. Howard was trying to be like a counselor. He's going to get me and my father together. We're going to go out to eat to lunch or dinner. And that was nothing that was uncommon because that's what I did. My father would take me out to eat, and then after that, he was gone. After that, he was gone. It was never like let's go to a movie, or let's just hang out and talk someplace in the park, or let's go in the car and park someplace and talk. Nope. Once dinner was over, he was gone. And every time we went out to dinner anyway, when he was famous, people would come over to the table, so I couldn't even have my private time with my father because he was a celebrity. Okay? But anyway, so I call up and I said, let me call my sister up and let her know. Maybe she'll call in. I called in. She said, give me the number real quick. She wanted to give it to him because she asked him at 16 to pay for her college. He told her no. She never saw or had a word with him ever again until 1989. So she calls in and really has a big fight with him. How do you know you don't have grandchildren? You never gave us a dime. You gave us $40 a week. He's yelling and screaming his head off at her. Mm-hmm. Okay, Howard is loving this. They get done. They stop. Howard said, okay, Luann, we gotta put this to rest. She says, okay, I understand, Howard. I just want people to know what he is. I call my grandmother up. Now, she didn't understand what I was going to tell her. She didn't understand calling. She didn't understand the radio, understand nothing. But me and my grandmother were so tight, if I told her to do something or she told me to do something, she did it. Grandma, call this number up. My father's on the radio. He's talking bad about the family. Me and my sister, me and Luann just called up. I'd like you to call in. Wow. When they got my grandmother on the phone, they couldn't believe it. And he went at my grandmother like a rabid pit bull. He said things that were so sad to me because I was so close to her that it was very, very hurtful. And people actually thought it was staged. They thought all this was staged because my father used to talk very well about the family and do Italian comedy. So they thought that this fight was just a stage thing. And even when I was finally, I was at Howard Stern a couple of times, and I was actually in his studio with Robin and my father right across the way from me. People were calling up because they could call in the Howard Stern show. And they said, oh, this is definitely staged. And then Howard would say staged and hang up on them. So that became a real big thing.
Wait, hang on a second. So you had other show, you were on Howard's show other times?
I was in the studio. No, the first time it was a all telephone call from Long Island with my mom. My mom never called in. My mother never had anything to do with any of this. Mm-hmm. People mixed up thinking my grandmother called in, thinking that was my mother. No, that was my father's mother. Mm-hmm. My mother didn't want anything to do with my father and never got involved. but she was quite happy that I called in. And I am forever grateful to Howard Stern because now I finally had a voice and I could let people know the real story, the real story, not the facade that my father created. Okay. So I was going to school to the Center for Media Arts to learn how to interview and to get into the, the media and stuff. And when I graduated, which was only, the school was like maybe 5 or 6 months, I graduated. I wanted them to get me a job working in the media. So we don't get jobs. I said, I thought you were going to get me a job. No, you got to go around becoming an intern. Oh, I said, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. They said, well, we can give you a couple of leads. Go to this show, go to that show. There was other shows that were on that are no longer on. I can't remember. But I ended up at the Geraldo Rivera show. He was in the Hell's Kitchen area before he went to CBS. And I became an intern. Never walked in, told him who my father was, never used my father's name as a card to try to get me anywhere. I wanted to get someplace myself. So I'm working as an intern over there. And while I'm working over there, they end up moving over to CBS with Joan Rivers. So I get to work with Joan Rivers now in Geraldo. Okay. And a promotions producer I end up becoming. And I was an intern, and they end up hiring me because I got on the front page of the Daily News all by accident when Angela Bowie was going to be on the Joan Rivers show, and she had something to reveal, and Joan couldn't get it out of her. And Howard was on the show at the same time, and I was in the control room working the pictures because they would, they had this fancy Sony machine of the time. And I took a picture, and she came out and said that she came home and found David Bowie and Mick Jagger in bed together. And I brought that down. My boss had said to me, Mike, I know you're going down to the flower shop in the World Trade Center to go to work. He said, but if you can do me a favor, if you could make a stop off at the Daily News and just drop this envelope off. He said, of the pictures that you took. I didn't think nothing of it. Well, the next day I came in, everybody was standing up. My boss came running over. I said, what did I do wrong? He said, Mike, the CEO, everybody can't believe it. It made the front page of the Daily News. Made the front page of the Daily News. They hired me on the spot for $150 a day as a promotion producer for Geraldo and Joan.
Wow.
Now I got on the show with my father.
Right.
I got on the show with my father when I went over to. I used to watch. There was a big calendar. I would say as big as the wall behind me, or the big as the wall behind you. And they had in magic marker the upcoming shows and themes, and the producer who would be doing that show. I kept watching week after week. I saw a show, Can Fatherhood Be Forced? I said, oh, something about fathers. Let me go ask the producer, Michelle, what this is about. I went over. She told me what it was about. I said, okay. I said, well, I want you to know something. I'm Pat Cooper's son. She looks at me silently, picks one of those post-ups and says, look, we've been trying to get the Cooper family's telephone number over at the Howard Stern show, and they would not give it to us. Now, this was late December or early January that she was doing this, and I did the Howard Stern show in August of '89, and we're talking January of 1990. So now I said, I want to do a segment on your show, on this show. She said, you're not going to get the time you got on Howard. This is television now. It'll be nationally all over. I said, I want to have a voice. This is my only chance. She told my father. My father had to sign a release form. So my father wasn't set up. He said he was set up at the Geraldo show. He wasn't set up. You have to sign a release form. He asked me what the show was about. I told him exactly what it was about. Fathers that weren't there. He knew everything. But he came on like an animal. And he looked really bad. The Howard Stern show brought him up a level up because a whole new generation, the younger generation, listened to my father. So if they weren't Italian and didn't know who Pat Cooper was, other than hearing him from the Howard Stern show, a whole nother generation got to know who Pat Cooper was from Howard Stern, because my father was a regular. And every time I was home in Manhattan, when I finally moved out of my mother's house, and I would put the radio on at 6 a.m. and heard he was there, I would put my clothes on and jump there and head to the studio every single time he was on to keep it going. And I kept it going for weeks on end until my father told Howard to stop letting me in. And, Gary.
But you weren't on, right? When you went to the studio, you weren't on. You were just.
Oh, yes.
You were.
Oh, yeah. I was in the studio with Howard and Robin and my father. I was right in the studio on the mic.
on the
Yeah. And I can't find that one on the internet.
right,
Believe it or not.
right, because we only have that one interview the first time you call in.
Right.
We don't have any of the
Right.
other ones.
And there
So
was so many more.
oh God. So I have to ask a question. So you worked on Joan Rivers. Now, Joan Rivers had to know your dad, right?
Right. And
So
my father never liked Joan. My father never liked Joan Rivers. And my father wrote a small little book, a comic book that I have here of all negative things about Joan Rivers. It just was sketches and pictures. Joan with all her friends. I'll give you one page in the book. It was a very tiny book. It wasn't text or nothing. Joan with all her friends. You see her at this long, long table with about 15 chairs, and Joan is sitting there at the head of the table with nobody around. As a dig to her. But she never came at me and said, I don't want him working here because I don't like his father. And his father doesn't like me. She never was like that. She treated me really well. Her and Geraldo treated me like gold. And I never will forget that experience in my life. They gave me a voice. They gave me a voice, Ellen.
So you went on, and again, everybody, you can find the Geraldo interview as well. That's on your website.
On my website. And you can find it on there. There's 65,000 views on part 1, and part 2, there's 23,000 views.
And so this was my takeaway in listening. I was rooting for you guys to get together. I really was. And your dad was, look, I'm not a therapist, but obviously there was, aside from the anger issues, the obvious anger issues. And again, let's go back to, he didn't get the love from his father abandoned him, blah, 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 blah. If you don't rectify it, it stays with you, and then you repeat that behavior. I think we know enough now to know that happens.
Correct.
But there was something, I'm going to use the word bipolar, but I don't know if that's the correct word.
Absolutely.
But he
Absolutely.
was so like, yeah, Mike, I love you. Well, I don't want anything to do with you. Yeah, Mike, I gave you money. Yeah, no, I didn't. Like, he was so back and forth.
And everybody always said that I was chasing my father for his money. Now, you tell me a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old that knows anything about money. All I wanted was a telephone call. I wanted him to be Santa Claus on Christmas. I wanted to get a hug from my father. I wanted to know my father loved me. But no, he abandoned me. They went out to Vegas, and she pretended, that woman, Patty Prince, that she went around. My father told me she was so angry because he was on Mike Douglas and Merv Griffin telling everybody that he adopted a baby girl, okay? And there's a picture in the newspaper, or even on my website, showing the 3 of them together when they adopted her in 1970. And she's going around, his second wife, going around telling people that she gave birth to Patty Jo when she couldn't give birth to her because she had a hysterectomy in her 20s. So she didn't have a womb.
Just to be, should play devil's advocate here. I mean, again, adopting now is a beautiful thing, and it's so welcome.
It's always a beautiful thing. Well, I don't know what she was embarrassed about.
I don't know. 1970 was, I think, I'm just saying, as a woman, especially women back then, not being able to have a child was detrimental, and it just makes you feel, I mean, listen, even today, right, women, I mean, now we have in vitro, whatever, but it's still there's like a stigma to it, and it's something that makes a woman feel bad. Look, this woman obviously didn't do you right and all, but I'm just trying to tell you that I can understand that, and especially again at that time, why she would say that. I just, I get it. But that doesn't excuse her for.
But even when we got into the, the 21st century, she still continued that facade.
Because that's
what was the agenda here? What was her agenda? Her agenda was keep me and my sister and my father's family away from my father as much as she could be, and have her own little supposedly Christian family that she was far from being a Christian out in Las Vegas. And my father gave everything to his adopted daughter, paid for her school, paid for her weddings. He paid her husband. Then Rob gives me trouble because I wrote my memoir about my life, and I mentioned that she's adopted. Now, when this book came out, she was 35 years old. You think she would know by 35 she was adopted? She was. She would know by 35. But
Right.
they're saying to me that they wanted to tell their children that mommy was adopted, and I let it out in my book, and I shouldn't have done that. Like, I needed their permission to write my memoirs when that was my blood, and they weren't even blood. And they treated me because they knew the gold was at the end. They thought my father was going to die first, leave everything to Patty Prince, and that would trickle down to Rob and Patty Joe Weidenfeld. And that didn't happen that way. And then my father was estranged from them for 10 years. And when my father was sick, guess who came into the picture? My stepmother, Emily Connor Cooper. Okay? And everybody said she was a gold digger now because there was a 40-year difference, and she was after my father's money, not knowing anything about Emily. Now, Emily comes from show business royalty. Her mother was a singer, and up for a Grammy Award, she sang with the folk group, the Serendipity Singers. Okay? And she was inducted into the Colorado Music Hall of Fame with Judy Collins about 10 years ago. So her mother, she come from a show business family. She worked for she's born in Texas, lived in Florida, came to New York by herself for 21 years, worked for the hedge funders, okay? And she made her own money. She bought her house in Vegas and told my father she was leaving. My father had a condo in a co-op in Upper West Side. She was dating my father at the time. She says, I'm going to Vegas. I can't take New York no more. And my father says, well, if you're going to Vegas, I have to come. I love you, and I need somebody to take care of me. I'm going to come. She went out. She bought a house with her own money. People think my father bought her the house. They're calling her gold digger. They're trashing her all over the internet like they trashed me all these years, calling me a gold digger. And I just have to say, I have to give the respect. These teeth in my mouth that my father told me when they were knocked out that I should gum my food. He didn't want to pay $3,000. She paid $40,000 out of her own money. And when I went to go see my father, when I met her for the first time in 2017, she put me up in a hotel, and she was bringing me cash every day. And that cash wasn't coming from my father. That was coming from her bank account. She fed me because my father was using her as a go-between, because that was the first time in my life that I asked my father for financial help because I was down at a low point in my life. I had lost my apartment. Okay, I went to Florida to try to work on my business. It didn't work out. I went through $200,000 in 3 years. And I went to my father for help, got nothing. But she helped facilitate and helped me to reconcile with my father. At least I had a dialogue with him to ask him the questions that bugged me for 55 years. And if it wasn't for Emily Connor Cooper, that would never happen. But everybody calls her a gold digger. And I told her, when my father dies, you're going to see how many of everybody who called my father their best friend, how many of them are going to be around once he dies. They're only being nice to you because my father would lay them out if they disrespected you. And I can't tell you how many I had to throw overboard that were texting her and disrespecting her and calling me up. Guys, friends of my father's that I never met in my life, calling me up, asking me, why did he have to marry her? My father said to me that they told my father that she was after his money, and my father turned around and said, well, if she is, she's a smart woman, but she's not after my money. You know why? Because I gave it to her already. Before I died, she already got my money before I died. And my father left everything to her, and his adopted daughter, who he took care of and paid for everything for them, and her husband, who didn't even have a job, took care of them, didn't hear from them. My father was estranged. His son-in-law went behind his back to try to do a documentary on my father's life to make money off my father. If he needed money from my father even helped his mother. My father gave out money like it was, like nothing. And he was a big philanthropist, my father, and a very generous man, and he took care of them. Long as they weren't, the Caputos, he didn't do nothing. I saw both of the wills. I saw the wills before Patty Prince died. He left me and my sister $1. When Patty Prince died, he made another will. He left everything to his daughter, Patty Joe. He left me and my sister $1. I saw it with my eyes, Ellen, on the first page. Nothing goes to me or my sister or our children. $1. He left everything to Patty Joe. You know who sabotaged that? Patty Joe's husband because of what he tried to do to my father by backstabbing him behind his back. And they didn't talk. Now my father's sick. They're living out in Vegas. They know they're 15 minutes away. The grandchildren never called. They never got a Father's Day gift. She does an interview on the radio that Rob probably set her up because she's a school teacher, works for the Board of Ed. So she's got to be very careful for what she says in the media. And he's a media hound because he sent me a letter. You had the nerve of him. Think about this, Ellen. The nerve of him to send me an email saying to me that he wants to, I know more people in the media. So he said, let's set up a debate. And I'm thinking to myself, debate. And I'm reading the email and it says a debate between me and you to show how much your father treated me more like a son and then than his own flesh and blood. Now, look, Ellen, do you see my forehead, right? Does it say the word stupid up here at all? Do you see the word stupid? This fool thought that I was going to do anything with him. He's the most irrelevant person, okay? He's not even part of the family. Then that either of them have blood. Not one fucking phone call. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
Okay. So
I have my father's phone. So she goes on this interview and lies and say that my father changed his phone number. There was only one text from her from my father. And the text said, Dad, Aunt so-and-so died in Ohio. That's it. Know how you're feeling. Know how you're doing. The kids, they weaponized the grandchildren. They never called. My father never got a Christmas card from one of the grandchildren in December. Guess what happens in January? One of the grandchildren calls him up, doesn't ask him how he's feeling, ask my father for $8,000 so she can take a trip to Australia or Scotland somewhere. So my father was a walking ATM machine for the Weidenfeld family.
Right.
That's where the trouble is now after my father's gone. And he's going to use, I'm telling you, when you post this, you're going to see the comments, and I want you to leave the comments open. He's going to go under alias names, and he's going to post hateful comments. I had to get him off of Instagram. I had to get him off of the interview I did with John Melendez because he's putting hateful things against me, calling trashing my stepmother. And listen, I'm just like my father. My father had a loose screw, and I got the same DNA as my father. And I'm not going to have anybody disrespect my stepmother, my mother, or my grandmother. You could say anything you want about me. I don't care what you say about me. You could leave all the bad comments on. But once they start coming on there trashing that what I'm saying is untrue, I want your audience to know that I got the truth. I wrote the truth here, and I got the only verified Instagram that anybody that wants to know anything about my father is under Emily's Las Vegas, okay? With an S, and at Emily's Las Vegas on Instagram, and at the Pat Cooper on Instagram. They're both verified. Anything you see on Facebook are impersonators, right. And they're trying to say that they're in with my father, and there's so much crap on there. I want people to stay on the right track. Or if they look at my website or my books, dearpatcooper.com. All my books are on Amazon. All you got to do is put my name in on Google. I come up all over the first page with my father. So okay. I just say that.
Okay. So much here. Okay. So clearly your father's second wife, whatever her issues were, okay, whatever, I mean, the woman's now passed, whatever her, obviously she didn't help the relationship with you and your father. If anything, it became even more cantankerous. But like you said, it takes two to tango. Your father's a grown man. He was his own person.
Right.
So, he could have very easily been like, just stay out of it. I'm going to have a relationship.
Right. These are my kids. Right. We got our new family here, Patty. These are my kids. Right. I'm going to take care of my kids. Away. Right. We're okay. Step back. Right. These are my blood.
So, we kind of know, so we know all that. And then this adopted daughter, this daughter and her husband, who sounds like a real piece of work.
I mean, Steve.
I'm listening to you, and it's so sad. It's so sad, Michael, because, like, first of all, at the end of the day, your father's not here. The money doesn't mean anything anymore, and it was always about that. It wasn't about like time and love and nurturing and
people didn't say anything nice about me.
and
It's still
it's
on the
very
internet.
sad. But let's just so hopefully everybody was following everything. So this lady dies, and then ultimately he meets Emily, who goes by Emily
He
Cooper.
met her at the Friars Club in 2010.
And she was sort of like in the business, wasn't she? Was she in like
Well, she
radio?
worked for NBC. She was a
Right,
producer for NBC and
right.
CBS.
And
Okay.
CBS.
She graduated with honors from NYU and
No,
she lived in New York 21 years. And
she,
coincidentally, believe it or not, she had an apartment. My father didn't have an apartment there anymore, but she lived at 180 West End Avenue. When
oh,
my member, yeah, isn't that coincidental? She would
okay,
be
so
living.
that's what I wanted to say. We didn't get Emily on, but hopefully I'll get to meet her. But you did do the interview with John Melendez, and
Yes,
you two were on,
yes.
and it was really beautiful how you brought her on. She sounds like obviously a very smart lady.
She's an angel. She's an
She was
angel.
Pat's third
Okay,
wife.
look at these teeth. Okay. I told her because when she got the money, I said to her, I don't want nothing. I said, I took care of myself all my life. My father never gave me a dime. But if you're going to ever do anything, my dentist says he's never seen anybody that had crowns in their mouth for 46 years and yours are cracked. They need to be redone, Mike. And I told her that. She says, well, we can't have Pat Cooper's son having bad teeth. So she says, you go to your dentist and you take care of it. I said, it's not going to be $10,000 or $20,000, Emily. She says, don't worry. I'm going to use my money and I'm going to take care of you, Mike. And in 7 months, I had one implant. I got no more bridges except one bridge. I used to have 3 bridges and she paid $40,000 out of her own money. She's an angel. And now they're calling her a gold digger. That's what they're calling her. And she got her own show coming out, by the way.
What show?
It's going to be called Legends and Laughs. It's a television show. She's already got 6 or 7 people in the can talking
That's
about old
great.
Vegas and the new
Maybe
Vegas.
we can have you both on.
That's what I'm trying to say. And
promote
you
the
can maybe
show.
go on her show. It's all show business. So she's got 6 or 7 in the can already. I don't want to put who the guests are, but I know that you'll know all her guests. And I'm very excited for her. And she finally, she went through mourning for a year. And she lived with my father over at a place. I don't know if you know of the place. It's a senior place. It's Las Ventanas.
This is in Las Vegas.
In Summerlin.
Las
It's
Vegas.
a place where seniors go when they get sick. But it wasn't a nursing home.
Right.
$8,000 a month. Okay, just to give you $8,000 a month.
Right.
All right, 300,000 down. Okay, so when I went there, it looked like a spa. It was gorgeous, and she took care of him. She didn't work. She gave up a career. She didn't leave him alone for 15 minutes. She was afraid he might fall. He had COPD. He never had dementia. Anybody who says my father had dementia is lying. They're wrong. He didn't die of dementia. He had all his marbles, and he disinherited his adopted daughter and Rob ever since for 10 years. And he was very hurt by what they had their kids do to my father. I mean, because the kids have their phones every 24/7 here. They couldn't give my father a text.
So tell us, well, look, they were like raised by wolves, these people. So,
Right.
But tell us what it was like for you to so it sounds like you, in some ways, and your dad did sort of reconcile, right? You were able to,
In sort of a way,
because
as
of Emily.
could be, because he was ill and, he had to be taken care of by Emily, and I didn't want to interfere too much. And they were out in Vegas.
So what was that like? What was that like when you sat down? You said you've gotten questions.
I was a little boy. My father was 6'2" and towered over me like a string bean. And when I seen him in his last years, he was more frail. He looked more weak, like I could push him over. Right. When he was always towering over me and very aggressive and loud, like people saw him. He was the same person off and on the stage. You know what I'm saying? He entertained off the stage and everything. All right. And I felt sad that he couldn't hear anymore. And thank God for Emily, because she got him a good hearing aids and got his hearing back, because I couldn't even have a conversation with him. But I knew, I know what old age looks like. And I know when you're near, you're closer to the back door. And I knew that he didn't have many years left. But what she did do, and I love her forever for it, is that she gave my father 6 more years of life, and she brought us together. And that's something that I couldn't do for 55 years, or my grandmother could do. How could I not respect this woman and see these people bad-mouthing this woman that they'll know nothing about her, and bad-mouthing me and calling me up when she's going through mourning. Not one of my father's friends that call themselves their best friends ever offered condolences to me. Not one. I can't stomach Rob. I seen what he did. He went onto Wikipedia page and he put my father had 2 grandchildren, Eva and Hannah, was Patty Joe and Rob's grandchildren. My sister has 3 grandchildren, which means Pat Cooper had 5. I put 5, he went back, put 3. I put 5, he put back, went to 3. So know what he does to spite me? You know what Rob Wedenbaugh does to spite me? He takes my beautiful shirtless pictures, because I was in really great shape, okay? Puts them on Wikipedia and says that Pat Cooper will never have more grandchildren because his son is a homosexual.
Oh my God. What a
Yep. To try to get back at me for putting in my memoir that his wife was adopted and she was 35 and she told me she didn't know. Okay. And then he took it off in 3 days because he knew he'd have a lawsuit. And that's what he thought. And he thought he was outing me. Like nobody knew I was gay. My whole family knew. So it didn't matter. But that's what he did viciously.
And let's clear this up. Your father didn't have a problem. The issue wasn't because you were gay, which you came out obviously.
No, everybody always asks me that question.
It had nothing to do, but I know from just listening to your interviews, let's just get that clear. It had nothing to do with that.
My father wasn't homophobic. First of all, it was in the business. I mean, come on, how many gays are in the business? Let's face it, in the closet and out. And he was never homophobic. And when you read his book, you'll understand he wasn't even a racist. Back in 1959. When he gave a black woman his seat on the bus driver slammed on the brakes. My father almost went through the windshield and he said, "Who is the N lover on this bus?" And my father says, "Are you talking to me?" I said, "Yes, you're the N lover. Get off the bus."
That's nice.
Okay, he said, "But the woman wanted the seat." No, he said, "She gets to go to the back of the bus." And he said, "No, she got to stand up." My father got kicked off the bus, no money in his pocket, from the South. From those Christians in the Florida in the South, the Christians kicked so my father wasn't a racist and he wasn't a homophobe. And he knew I was gay. And everybody always asked me that question. And also, if you could see also the first question before I pulled Emily into the interview, I told her what people are going to ask me now that my father's gone is, did he leave you anything in the will? That's going to be a question. And if you watch the first 10 minutes of John's interview, that question comes out. And I said to John, what did I say to John? No, he left me something better. And I pull Emily over into the screen. And he knew Emily because she was on there a couple of times on the Howard Stern show, not because of my father. She was just on because she knew the people who worked there, because she was in the business. And that's what everybody wants to know. If my father left me money, that he would leave me money before he died. I said, I know my father better than you. I'm not getting that. So I never expected anything. But the Weidenfelds, they thought they were going to get the whole pot. And when their friends called me up and say, why did he have to marry her? I know what that went. They were spies trying to find out because they couldn't believe that my father, and she played victim on that interview, that podcast that she did, 2-hour podcast, crying when she was grown up as a privileged white girl, had everything she wanted and everything paid for, everything that me and my sister never got. And we weren't looking for money.
So
and they're crying the blues that they were disinherited.
So these people, you have to cut off like a cancer because
well, they are. Well, they are cut off, but they're always trying to remain relevant. So now, after the interview, wait till you see the comments. That's what I tell you. Prepare yourself. But I want you to put them there. I want you to open the comments up.
Please
do.
Keep them
Please
open.
do.
I also try to be about not sometimes in my own life, but about positivity. And the fact that you and Emily have this beautiful relationship, that she loved your father very much and she cared for him and she brought you together. And, that obviously was huge for you. You and Emily want to do things to continue to keep your father's legacy alive.
And we have done in 2024.
Yeah. So I want you to talk about that. But before you talk about that, I have a question. Did your sister reconcile with your father
Never.
That you did?
After he said to her no at 16 years old that he wouldn't pay for her college, she never wanted anything to do with him again.
And that
my sister married a man who worked very hard in the bank. My sister became a special ed teacher. Ironically, the same thing that Patty Jo does. She's a special ed teacher, works for the Board of Ed. That's why when you hear anything bad from the Weidenfelds and Vicious, it's always her husband that does it. I think he did some things when she was at work that she didn't know about, contacting me, sending my father a letter and everything like that, you know? But she's got to be careful. She works for the Board of Ed, and if they find out she's got a crazy husband or she said something derogatory, she could lose her job. And then her and her husband are going to have to work at McDonald's.
That's
her
problem.
ATM machine is closed.
That's her problem. And you know what? She should let it, they should let it go now. Your father, rest in peace. Everybody should just pray for his soul. And as a comic, watching him, we need to respect the legacy of the people that came before us, because again, it is even though your father made a lot of money, whatever, it's still a very rough life. And I love the fact that what's really nice too is that he was forced to change his name, but later on we knew he was Italian, and then he embraced it, and I think that that's really beautiful. And you did something for the he's going to be in the Italian American Museum. Is that?
Well, we did an event there.
Right.
Joe Piscopo was there, and we did an event there. They were renovating, so they weren't reopened yet. But we did the first event there, and it was spectacular. We had it videotaped. We got photographs there. It was a big success. It was catered. Dr. Shelsa, who's the president of the museum. It's a beautiful museum. It's all about the culture. They respected my father because he was a pioneer. He did for the Italian American people what Jackie Mason did for the Jewish people. Okay, and they plan on doing a 6-month event on just my father displaying it. Right now, they got Italian puppets there, which are beautiful. I saw it. And then when they do event, they keep it up for 6 months. But they told me after they're done with my father's 6 months period of time, whenever that's going to come, they're going to permanently keep a little corner for Pat Cooper and keep it going, like a little something always in the museum for him, as they change different people in the Italian American community that brought everything together. So that was spectacular. Then we went over to the Botanic Gardens because they were supposed to have a plaque down for my father. I think he gave the money in 2001 to put him on the celebrity path. And the celebrity path is everybody who was born in Brooklyn who became famous people. Mm-hmm. So I saw Streisand down there. I saw Neil Diamond. I saw a lot of famous people names that I can't even forget. Mm-hmm. So I called up, and me and Emily went down there because we wanted to see it. And when we didn't see the plaque down, and my father, for some strange reason, told Emily in 2016 or 17, call them up and see, if they got my plaque down. Because he sent money, in the early 2000s. And they said, yes, they lied. And we went down there and we blew a fuse. You either give us the money back, which we'd rather not have, right, or you have the plaque down for my father. And they came through. And they put him at the front, a brand new plaque. The museum, the Botanic Gardens was closed. It was just us. I sent you the photograph. You saw the photograph, how beautiful that is. Mm-hmm. Got 700 views on Facebook and over 200 shares. The one with his picture and the plaque.
Nice, nice.
With his name on it.
So this is, this is almost sort of like having a relationship with your father again,
right,
in a different way and in a loving way. I've got chill. I got
right.
chills. I think.
That's what I mean. I don't have no money. I don't have no money in my bank book from my father. He didn't leave me nothing. I told Emily very frankly, I'm very honest and very open. For his legacy, that's the last thing she asked me when the last time we spoke before he died. She said, will you help me with his legacy if something happens to him? I said, no problem. Because I didn't know Emily that well. She could have been a phony like the second wife was. Right. I mean, I didn't know. Right. I really didn't know what she was like, if I could trust her, or if she really meant that, right, because my father didn't help me when I asked him to help me then. But we talked. So in any event, I said, yes, I will. But if you're asking me to do something for Father of the Year, I ain't coming through for that one. I got to be honest with you. But for his legacy and his talent, my father, I loved him for what he did for the Italians. People loved my father, and I respect him for his talent. I miss him. I was saddened when he passed away, but like I told people, I lost my father in 1960. So I didn't have to go through any mourning. That's how I always felt. But I chased him for 55 years because my grandmother got me on that ride. And then I tried to, when I got old enough, I tried to bring my father back to my grandmother. And I couldn't do that for her before she died. But my father was angry at his sisters, how evil the Caputos were, was the sisters, not Gracie, but he got angry and stopped talking to Gracie, the opera singer, and she was a Jesus freak. I mean, I told you last night on the phone, everything had to be always about Jesus. And she sings for Jesus now. That's what she told me before she passed away. She died 45 years. She told me a miracle was always coming. I never knew when's the miracle coming, Grace? Pray, pray, pray. Pray with me now, Mike, on the phone. And I'm not religious. I went to Catholic school for 12 years, but I'm not religious. And I said to her, I do believe in God, but I'm more spiritual. Okay, Grace, to respect her, I did it. So my father got angry at her and cut her off because when my grandfather died and they wrote the obituary, they said my grandfather was survived by 3 daughters. They left my father out. Gracie would have never done that. Gracie never said anything bad about my father. But his younger sisters, Carol and Maria, they knocked him like, I couldn't even mention. It got to the point when I was with my Aunt Marie for a week and I stood with her for a week that she wouldn't even allow me to mention my father's name in her house, her own brother's name. Okay? Then when my grandmother died, they left him out of the obituary. That hurt my father. He told me that, okay? And Gracie couldn't do anything about it. I looked at my father and said, Grace was up against 2 against 1. She wasn't going to do anything, and she's into her religion. So she would pray. She's not going to fight with her sisters because they did that, and she would have had no control over it, Dad. She has no control over it. Why would you not talk to her? She never said a bad thing about you. The other 2 I could understand, but not her. I said, you want to see what your other 2 sisters look like? He goes, no. I shoved him in his face. And he points to Maria and he said, oh, that's the troublemaker. I think she's bipolar, but they're all in their 80s now. They're all old ladies now, they're old now. So I don't talk to any of them. I got all the toxic people out of my life because I had a life. And I'm not playing victim because I've been through it. I wrote my books. That was my therapy. I wrote 3 different books, 3 different memoirs. I'm good now. And now I got a new family. I got a stepmother, a famous step grandmother, Diane Decker from the Serendipity Singers. Okay? And I got a stepsister.
Oh, that's nice.
Emily's sister.
That's nice.
Okay, that would make a sister?
An
aunt. A step aunt. Okay, I get it. I'm so mixed up with it all. They're so lovely to me. And they treat me and they tell me they love me. I don't get from the Caputos. They're crazy. The Caputos are crazy. My grandfather was a manic depressant. Instead of my grandmother got the house, guess where he lived for 40 years, 30 years or 40 years? He lived at the St. George Hotel in the studio with a picture of Rudolph Valentino, who was his idol. I think he became jealous of my father. He wanted to become an actor. I think my grandfather wanted to, but he had such a strong accent, he couldn't be because he was an exceptionally good-looking guy. I mean, girls would see him laying down bricks in the street, and he would say, what are you looking at? I'm a married man. What are you looking at? My grandfather was really good looking. I sent you the picture of my grandmother and grandfather last night, so you can see that. And, so that's why the estrangement came from. Now, why he hated my grandmother is something I would never accept. I told him, I don't care what you say about anybody else, but don't say nothing about your mother to me.
And
because your mother building you apart. Don't say nothing about grandma to me.
And very unusual for an Italian family to be, the son and the mother, to have for him not to respect his own mother, like really.
Of course.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense. But
and then the nasty comments that people said about the mother, the mother this, the mother that, they're speaking about my grandmother, thinking that I have no feelings. Oh yeah, listen to that family. All they want is his money. They said I wrote this book because I try to make money off my father's name. And let me tell you, Ellen, nobody makes money off a book unless you write a Harry Potter book or you're a celebrity or a sports figure and you got a #1 book. I spent more money on all 3 of my books than I ever made back. I did well. I got good reviews, but you don't get rich. I didn't get rich
I,
off of,
I have a
after my father's
I have a children's book, by the way, about being a
right.
godparent.
And
I
know.
totally know. I totally
I
know.
mean, and then they got to get the promoters and they got to get the cover made and you got to spend this money. You got the scammers out there saying they could
I mean,
influence and they could
right.
get.
I'm glad I
Oh,
did it, and
Ellen.
I'm sure you're glad you did it. But it's not. I always funny when I sell books after my show. I'm like, oh, this is really cute. I go, it is, and I'm really proud of it. But if you want to make money, don't write a book. So
Exactly. And that wasn't my purpose. I wasn't trying to make my other two books has nothing to do with my father. His
right.
name is not even mentioned in my other two books. They're different subjects. One's about my sexual orientation, and one's about the politics of today and the Christians, what they did to the four marginalized groups. Okay, the Jews, the Black people, the LGBT community, and women most recently by taking away the rights to have an abortion. That's what my third book's about. Very controversial. Nothing to do about Pat Cooper. But this book was a winner. And I treasure this book. And my mother, thank God she lived long enough to read it because she'd call me up. Oh, how are you doing? How are you? And then once I started writing the book, she said, if anybody could write the book, Mike, you can. Write the book, write the book. So then when I used to get calls from her, first question was, where are you with the book? How's the book coming along? Ma, I'm trying to get the first the first chapter. It's the hardest chapter. I got the other ones done. The first chapter is the hardest one, Ma. All right, get it done, get it done. And thank God, because 2 years after I wrote this, my mother passed away. At least she got to see that I wrote the book and she was so proud of me.
So what's on the
honor my grandmother and my mother in the book. It's dedicated to my mother and my grandmother in the book.
And I encourage everybody. It's available on Amazon to
and Kindle.
We didn't, this happened so quickly. I didn't get a chance to read it, but I absolutely will.
It's okay. It's okay.
What is on the horizon for you? You obviously you're working with Emily, whatever you can do to preserve.
Well, she's got her own show coming up now.
Are you going to be involved in that?
With me because I'm going to consult with her because she was a producer, and so was I, a producer for Geraldo and Joan. And she bounces things off me. I bounce things off her, and we talk about just personal things in our lives because we're like each other's therapists. Kind of, we could be on the phone 3 or 4 hours. The batteries are running out on the phone. We're plugging it in. She's on a red bar, whatever. But she's so loving, and she's always got so interesting because she's like a social butterfly. And everybody knows her out there. And not because of my father, because she is a person, what she did at the Flamingo, I have to say this before we go. I guess our time is running out. In May of 2024, a part of the old Flamingo sign, the Flamingo has outside, Flamingo sign was restored in honor of Pat Cooper's 60th anniversary of his first performance in Las Vegas, which was opening for Bobby Darin at the Flamingo in '63. My stepfather had that sign restored. It was all over the local news in Vegas. She had the whole sign restored like it was the Flamingo back in the day. And there was a whole big party and it was a big to-do. She found that in the junkyard, in the Flamingo. And she says, what's that? And when they told her, she says, is there any way we could renovate that? Because that's where Pat opened. And also Pat opened from Frank Sinatra almost 40 times.
Oh, I was going to mention, because I had heard it on John Melendez, and so I know her. So as a matter of fact, she did my podcast one time. Tammy, I don't know her, but she did my podcast one time, Tammy Piscatelli. So Tammy Piscatelli was close with your dad?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. See, like I said, we didn't have a relationship, so I don't know who was close, who was not close.
Right.
But
so I'm going to tell you something. I love you. I mean, you are really you've had a fascinating life, and I'm so sorry for your pain. Obviously, you've had real pain, and I give you so much credit for putting everything out there. You could have not easily. I have no idea what it feels like to have a famous parent. I have parents, but nobody's famous. So I don't know what that's like. And so I am a Christian. I am a Greek Orthodox. I have my own, obviously, opinions and stuff like that.
Right.
And I'm sure there's
what's going on
there's
TV.
the right things you and I are, certainly in sync with and stuff like that. But, separate and apart, I do love Jesus. He is my Lord and Savior.
I know. Okay. I see your cross.
And I believe that when we pass when we go to the kingdom, that we're different. We're the best version of ourselves. We look the best way. There is no hate there.
Or pain.
I think, right. And so I think that, your father is with his mother, his father,
Father,
things
my
reconciled.
mother, his second wife,
Right.
whatever,
It's not like it is down here.
down
I
here.
really, 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 truly believe that. And
That's good.
I'm glad for you that at least you got to spend time with your dad, even if it was toward the end, and you got
Right.
some of your questions, answered. And this beautiful relationship with Emily, who I like, again, I watched the Stuttering John interview, and I could tell right away. She was really,
She's real.
you
She's
could see
real,
it.
Ellen.
You
She's
could see
real.
she's smart. You could see, I'm very good instinctually. So I'm happy that that worked for you.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that you helped people with estrangement, because estrangement's estrangement, regardless, right?
Right.
Whether your parents famous or not,
That's what I wrote my book for, to
you're right.
help
It's still the
to
same
help other
thing. And
kids.
I'm sure that I'm sure you got responses and people that didn't reach out to you, but that really, you help them, or in sharing your story. So, and I think it's really beautiful of you because you could have just been like, I'm done, once like, I'm done,
Well,
to,
my sister did that.
to kids.
My sister did that at 16.
Well, and that was what she had to do to survive, right? That's
Right.
what she had to do. That
Right.
was her journey with your dad. This is your journey with your dad.
Right.
And I think it is beautiful as a comic,
And I
because
was really close with my grandmother. That was very special because she had other grandchildren, but nobody had the relationship that me and grandmother had. And I took care of my grandmother in the last year of our life. I took care of her. I was there for her,
so
you know. And
you're
I want to
quite
make
the
one thing. I
you're
also want to make one
quite
thing.
the quite the extra what I was you're quite the extraordinary person.
Thank you, Ellen.
And I
Thank you.
hope, and you're very creative, and I hope that you can, you continue on and just, I don't know, just develop things, as you see them. And again, you've got these three other books and that you're passionate about as well. So
Right.
you have a lot of irons in the fire.
What I want to make clear also is a lot of times when I go on the interview, I always hear people say, or they write it underneath my interviews. They write, what kind of son would go out there and air out the family's dirty laundry? And my answer to that is, I didn't put the quarter in the washing machine to do that. My father did that for 2 years, 2 years before I had a voice of Howard Stern gave me the voice, or I never would have. That's why I spoke about it all, because my father was bad mouthing the whole family, and he put all the dirty laundry out there to begin with. And that wasn't his shtick when he was coming up. He was talking good about the family, making fun of the St. Anthony, making fun of the meatballs, making fun of the way my grandmother looked in a comedic way. There was nothing wrong with that. Nobody was angry about that. But when you start putting people down, saying that we're evil, we're vicious, and we want this for his money, and we're garbage, we're white trash, then I had to get involved. And then they also say to me, oh, well, what kind of son would go on Geraldo and air out the dirty laundry? Did you really think, Mike, that was going to bring you and your father together? I said, you know what? You know why I did that? Because I was 32 years old, and everything I did never helped bring my relationship with my father together. And I thought by getting in the media and getting on his turf might change him. And then when that didn't work, I wrote my book, thinking if I wrote a book about it and he read my book, maybe that would change him. Nothing could change him. Only Emily Connor Cooper did that.
Yeah.
That's my life.
Yeah. I encourage people to go and to listen to the interviews, because you'll see the exchange. It's something that it's a little tough to take, more from your father's perspective. But look, this was his pain. This was his burden that he carried, for whatever reason. But he's at peace and he's in a good place. And
we're bringing him to Greenwood Cemetery from Vegas,
yes,
Davis Funeral Home.
That's,
and you might know it out there. And it's not really a nice looking place.
Mm-hmm.
My father brought all Patty Prince's family out there from Ohio and put them all out there and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get them all put there. And when my father met Emily and married Emily out there, okay? He didn't want to be in the same building as Patty Prince, so he was in another niche in a different, because he got cremated, and she wasn't cremated. And when I saw that place, I looked at Emily and said, Emily, this place is dangerous. You got to use a security code to get in. The door was open. Somebody could be hiding in here. You're in here looking at my father's niche, or they could break into my father's niche, whether they know he's famous or not. You got a watch in there. You got pictures of him in there. You got his ashes in there. Suppose somebody just breaks and destroys the place. You got to get him out of here. And when I told her about Greenwood, she had no idea. I said, he's from Brooklyn. Let's bring him back to Brooklyn. His parents are there. I'll be there. You'll be there. Your mother's going to be there. And they give tours. They give tours of famous authors, famous people. Leonard Bernstein's there. I mean, there are dozens of famous people there.
I am definitely taking a tour there, and usually you
have to go to Greenwood when you really have to go to Greenwood, or just look it up on the internet.
Yeah,
you know, it's 400. I wrote it down. It's like 428 acres in 6 different neighborhoods in Brooklyn. It spans in 6 different neighborhoods in Brooklyn.
That's wild.
And that's where his ashes are going to be, with a big tombstone with his picture. And when people are coming along in the cart and they're giving a tour, they'll see Pat Cooper's name there. And that makes me happy. And I'm going to be with my grandmother and grandfather a little bit away from that. They're seeing me, but I don't care. As long as they see my father and Emily and her mother, Diane Decker, who was up for a Grammy Award for Don't Let the Rain Come Down. And she's such a lovely woman. She's 82 years old now, Emily's mother. And she's so warm and wonderful. And they were such a talent. I mean, they went to the White House for LBJ. They sang at the Democratic Convention for LBJ.
Wow, a lot of history. A lot of history.
Yeah. She comes from show business. You
should pick her brain. That'd be a good book.
Oh, I always do. Oh, yeah. She tells me everything. We speak like mother and son.
That would be a good book.
You know, when she tries to tell me something, I go, yes, mother. Yes, mother. Because I'm older than her, and people think we're a couple. So she has to right away say, this is Pat's son. Oh, hi, nice to meet you. No, not my boyfriend. You know, they're thinking, you know, when I came out there, my father was dead a couple of weeks. They thought, oh my God, look at this. Her husband's not even dead 2 or 3 weeks. She's with another man, you know? And she likes older men, and I'm older than her. I look older than her. And they figured she's with a boyfriend already. So she had to say, no, this is Pat's son. This is Pat's son. This is my stepson, Michael. And she took me around and showed me around. She says, Mike, you're from, you know, show business royalty also. And I said, but I never got exposed to this because my father and I were never close. So I was never around this. I said, Patty Joe was, but I was never. I said, thank you for introducing me to people. We go to the Italian-American restaurant out there. And there's a table with my father's picture. That's his table. I don't know if it's table number 7. I forgot, but we sat there and they treat us like gold when we go in there.
That's really nice. I wish she booked comedy shows. I would hit her up.
Listen, she might have you on her show. She's going to have a lot of people on her show. I mean, she's got a lot of guests to have on. We're trying to get before they pass away. A lot of people are old now. I mean, look, Cher is in her 80s. Barbara's in her 80s. We're going to lose a lot of people in the next decade. So she's got a lot of people lined up.
Good.
I know she's friends with J.J. Walker or Jay Walker. Was it Jay Walker?
I
know you are too. I read your
for him once. Yeah.
Okay. So I read your thing. So she knows him. He's going to be on her show. He's definitely one that will be on her show. And I'm really excited for her.
Good.
Because I said to her, now you have to go through a mourning period. I don't know how long it's going to take you, but you're going to go back to being from Emily Connor Cooper. You're going to go back to being Emily Connor. That's what you're going to go back to be. You're going to go back to being Emily Connor, and you're going to have a lot of, you know, opportunities. And it's starting to happen for her.
Great. That's great. All right. Give us your website address again, and Instagram and Facebook.
Okay. So my website address for this one book is dearpatcooper.com. For my other 2 books, it's michaelcaputoauthor.com. One word. Or if you could put in 3 separate words, Michael Caputo author, I'm going to come up all on the front page of Google. You put in Pat Cooper's son, I come up. Okay. The next one's the Instagram verified accounts is at Emily's Las Vegas on Instagram. I think you joined. She told me you joined.
I did. Yeah, I did.
And if you want to know anything about my father, the best place to look is at the Pat Cooper. And the television show that she is going to be working at is at Hey avegastv.com.
Oh, okay.
avegastv.com.
Okay.
That's where she's doing like you, filming and they're editing it and all that stuff out of there.
That's great. That's great. All right. Well, we look forward to that. I thank you
I
so
don't
much.
think I missed anything, Ellen.
I don't think
So
so.
long. We're on like almost like John. We're almost like John. So
You're
we're on 90 minutes.
you're a good interviewer, interviewee, and I
And
hope
you're a good interviewer.
and
That's why
I
that's why I subscribed to your channel and everything. I loved it.
thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody, please, please, please follow Michael's Instagram, get his book, follow his story. Look out for Emily's show. We're very excited and we're very, very grateful. And I feel like I feel like I got to meet Pat Cooper through you. So
Thank you, Ellen.
that's a big thrill for me. And I'm Ellen Karis. You can find me on Instagram and at TikTok at Greek Chick Comic. And my Facebook page is Ellen Karis, Greek Goddess of Comedy. You can give me a like. And, we got this podcast. We've been doing this for 11 seasons, folks. Okay. So
Oh,
not a podcast. We do it once a week. We've been very consistent. We've had great guests like Michael. And so please, share it, like, spread it around like tzatziki on a souvlaki. I beg of you. We love doing it and we're going to continue to do it. So
what are you going to do with the pictures, Ellen?
thank you so much. We're going to put those at the end of this.
That's
And
really
I'm
great.
going to post them when I do the clip. I'm gonna carve out like a 30-second or like a minute clip of this, and we're gonna put some of the pictures on there too. My web guy is fantastic. He does all this. So
Right, I'm glad you like the pictures, and
they were great.
The best of the best.
They were great. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thanks, Ellen.
everybody. Mwah. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. I appreciate you. I really do, Ellen.
I
I really
appreciate you.
appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.